All right, we're going to start right on time. We may still get some people coming in. Um, Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. It's always nice to do these things and have people in the audience that are willing to participate. It's nice to see that there are people out there that are interested in the future of Malta. So just to give you a little update, the town of Malta adopted a comprehensive plan in June of 2023. That comprehensive plan identifies some recommended zoning changes. The town board has met at several different workshops. We talked about those zoning changes. We talked about other sort of proposals that are outside of that scope. And this, though, is the culmination of that. This is a public information session. Our consultants that are working with us on this from Barton and LaJudas, we have Bob Murphy and Margaret. I don't think I got Margaret's last name. So anyway, I'm gonna turn it over to them.
All right, well, thank you, Supervisor. All right, can you guys all hear me? All right. Again, my name is Bob Murphy. I'm a community planner with Barton and LaJudas. With me tonight is Margaret Thurston, also a community planner. As Supervisor explained, we've been retained by the town to assist with the zoning code update following the comprehensive plan. And, you know, one thing I like to kind of put out into space in advance of these public information meetings is that this is really about you all tonight. This is not about what I think. It's not about what the town thinks about different aspects of the zoning code. We need to hear from you, especially me. I don't live in Malta. I'm from Mechanicville, but I don't live in Malta. Margaret doesn't live in Malta. We'll never know Malta the way you all do who live and work here. So we can guide the process. We can give examples from around elsewhere in the state, but we need your input to tell us where the community wants things to go. So that's where we need your help tonight. So go ahead, Margaret. So just briefly tonight, we're going to go through the background of the project, run through our zoning code assessment, gap assessment, which is really forming our to-do list for what changes to make to the code. We'll go through recommendations from that analysis, as well as contemporary zoning issues that are kind of ubiquitous around upstate New York now. Following with some next steps and discussion, and we'll have polling questions throughout. So as well as Q&A and discussion at the end. You know, we got I think a good crowd tonight. We hope to get some meaningful feedback and hopefully collect it from a couple of different avenues. I'll also mention before we move on that we do have the existing zoning maps in two corners of the room and the zoning use and bulk tables, the current zoning use and bulk tables over by the sign-in sheet. When we finish our presentation tonight, if you'd like to make comments on those, please feel free. Nothing is sacred. Don't feel bad about marking them up. We have pens around the room as well. But often the best way for us to get your feedback is to write it down. We have pretty good memories, Margaret and I, and we can review the recordings. But if you mark it down, then we'll know exactly what you mean. So I encourage you to do that if you feel comfortable and so moved. So go ahead, Margaret. So we want your feedback. I've I think explained to most people we'd like to see your feedback on the form of our QR code participation tool. We'll also have a tool available for those watching online and watching the recording to answer the same questions. So if you know folks who couldn't make it tonight and want to participate, they will be able to. We'll be collecting feedback on those questions through next Wednesday, the 23rd. So, but you had a question on that, sir?
Yeah, you mentioned the QR code.
Yes.
Some of us don't have smartphones.
Okay.
Is there another way to access them?
Without a smartphone, so you can't get on web connection,
Oh, yeah, I have a web connection. I don't have a smartphone.
but you don't have a smartphone.
So then the survey will be available online.
We've got paper.
Not live tonight.
We've got some paper copies too. You got some there, Margaret?
Yeah.
All right.
Is anybody else in that vote that like a paper copy right now?
Yes, sir.
Along that same line, are you only taking answers to
So I'll explain that, well, I'll answer it right now, but there is a question on the online version where you can tell us what we may have missed, and it's open format, and you can submit it that way. So that's available for the next week.
And the online version is available
Right now.
on the town website.
We'll have a link for that at the end of the presentation tonight. Yep. So, all right, we'll move forward ahead here, but again, that link will be available for those watching online at the end of the presentation. So go ahead, Margaret. So here's our QR code if you missed it earlier. There's a couple different ways to get there other than the QR code. The other way to participate, Margaret, would be to submit text messages too. You can do it that way. And there's the who to text it to.
Yep, so for that, you would type in 22333 in the to box, and then text the word Grace DeSantis 875.
So a lot of tech so far. So, but there's a lot of different ways to participate. Go ahead, Margaret. We'll start with our first poll. See if these things are working. So get your phones out.
Okay. So does anybody need another minute to scan the QR code? Anybody?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question, just what's your relationship to Malta?
So the beauty of this is we can see answers live. So we can see kind of the makeup of the group here. You know, business owners, largely residents, some work here. So I think it's important to note that those who have a stake in the future of Malta come in different varieties. So can you scroll down at all, Margaret? We got.
Yep. I can get the tech to work.
There we go. So, all right, I think we can move on to the next one, Margaret.
Okay, so then just what brings you to today's meeting?
Yeah, what's your interest in today particularly? Is it to learn more about Malta's zoning code update? Is it to ask specific questions about the zoning code, give specific comments? Check all that they apply. Yeah, it should automatically move.
You should have that question up there now.
Yeah. Sorry about that, yeah. No, it should have connected, I'm not sure why. So we can see our responses on the board here now, more than half, to learn, some to ask questions, some to give specific comments. So go ahead, Margaret. And we'll get into the background of the project. So that's just an example of the tech. We'll use more of it in a bit. So what is a zoning code? Some of you may know this, some of you may not, but I felt like it was good to go through a brief refresher, one slide refresher. It's a set of regulations governing land use in a municipality, in New York State governed by the local municipality, the village, city, or town. It can influence and require certain uses to be prohibited some places. What are called bulk requirements, which are dimensional, how close a structure could be to a property line, to a fence, different buffer requirements, other regulating elements such as building characteristics, signage, landscaping, parking, nuisance control, such as lighting and noise, and more. Another aspect of the zoning code is that it needs to be compliant with an up-to-date comprehensive plan. That's what gives your zoning code justification for the way it is laid out. If you have, in some cases, there are places in New York State that have really old comprehensive plans or none at all. So in those situations, it's really important to have those comprehensive plans updated or have extremely robust public input to be able to provide standing for any zoning changes you might want to enact. So Town of Malta is fortunate with having the comprehensive plan recently updated in 2023, as the supervisor mentioned earlier. The state recommends updating the comprehensive plan once every 5 years. Not many communities meet that goal, but it is wise to keep it updated so that you can have land use regulations that reflect that. So the current code for the town of Malta is, the zoning code is in chapter 167 of the town regulations, establishing zoning districts and requirements for each district. There's also a form-based code for downtown Malta, which, you know, has really been, I think, a big focus of development in the last 20 years for Malta, after the advent of the chip plant and the development that brought. It's a newer approach to zoning. Most communities in New York State do not have that novel approach, but more are getting it all the time. So the timeline of the zoning code has gone over a few iterations since its inception. The current full code was adopted in 1989 with amendments in its for the zoning code in 2005, followed by the form-based code in 2013. As I mentioned earlier, the town comprehensive plan was adopted 2 years ago, which included zoning recommendations and brings us to this process that we're here for tonight. So it began last fall. What is our process for updating the zoning code? So we've laid out a 9-step process here to help give you a sense of how this works for this particular task, beginning with the review of the current zoning code, existing plans like the comp plan, like the EIS, other local area plans, the recommendations that those provide, doing internal outreach to town staff and officials. That helps us formulate a gap assessment, which we're in the stages of drafting following public comment tonight. So public meeting, we see number 4, that's where we are right now. Then we'll go through and take all the feedback and be able to finalize our draft gap, finalize our gap assessment, which is our to-do list. That's what do we need to do to update the code accordingly to all these documents that have informed it, as well as the folks who use it every day. Then we'll have a new draft of the code and map, and that'll move through legal review before getting to number 7 for public hearing, which we would anticipate getting scheduled later this spring. So this isn't the last say that the public will have in the zoning code update, but there will be that public hearing process, and you'll be able to react to the full code in its entirety. One of the things that we always provide at that stage is a red line markup version, because the code is, what is it, 100 and
Like
300 pages. So you won't have to dig through, well, they changed this 6 to a 0, you know. So we'll have it red line marked up, so you'll be able to see where the changes are. So you'll be able to, you won't be looking through it blind. So after that, and county referral occurs at that point as well, we move into the finalization process. Seeker, I should mention too, I didn't mention it earlier, before the code gets fully implemented. So that is the 9-step process that we outlined for this activity. So go ahead, Margaret. Our project team, many of them you know, many of them are in the room here, working with the town board as well as town planning staff. With BNL, I'm working with Margaret as well as my colleague Dan Theobald. So we've been working over the last 6 months or so on the early stages of this. We want to hear from the public now so we can move into the next steps of that gap assessment.
Okay, so that brings us to a bit about the gap assessment. There were several documents that we looked at for this. One was the zoning philosophy in the current code, the comprehensive plan, as Bob mentioned, a generic environmental impact statement, which basically looks at future development in the town and how it will impact land use, infrastructure, and the environment. The town, as well as Barton and Ladudis, did a review of the zoning code. Then we had an internal survey in the town. There was some input about planned development districts, workshops in the last couple of months, and then your input from today as well as the online survey will inform the code. So I won't go through all of these right now, but just a couple. In the comprehensive plan, there was a public survey as part of that process, and some results from that survey were that residents felt like they wanted to maintain Malta as a small town, have low taxes, limit the number of homes built, fill vacant commercial spaces before building new ones, preserve farmland and open space, address traffic concerns, and sustainability was also of value. For the comprehensive plan overall, there were a few main takeaways. Really trying to be thoughtful about development trends and anticipate them in advance so that the town can plan for them. Planning infrastructure expansion and development together, so making sure that development occurs in places where infrastructure, water as an example, can accommodate that. Shifting away from planned development districts, which we'll get into a bit more later, and protecting waterways, open space, and agriculture. And I'll turn it back over to Bob.
All right, thanks, Margaret. Yeah, so one of the other initial steps after looking at existing documents was to do a targeted survey of town staff, committees, and boards, such as the Zoning Board of Appeals, Planning Board, Historic Preservation Commission, Open Spaces Committee, to get their thoughts. We used the results of the comprehensive plan survey to kind of formulate that. And now that the rubber meets the road with the zoning. Good call. I didn't have my microphone on, so yeah. Hopefully I was loud enough. But some of the initial input results really reflected a lot of the same priorities that the community survey did in 2023, notably discouraging sprawl development, preserving the town's rural character, ensuring transportation safety in problem intersections, and protecting open space and the environment. This is I think a pretty common challenge across upstate New York, especially suburban communities, where you have development pressures threatening to change the character of a community, as well as housing pressures, and affordability pressures. So you have these competing issues, and every suburban town in upstate New York is facing similar things, not to quite the same extent as Malta, but in different ways. So go ahead, Margaret. As we talked about earlier, there have been a series of town board workshops on February 24th, March 10th, March 24th. There will be another one on Monday, April 21st. Throughout February and March, there was a district-by-district discussion at those meetings about the tweaks that are proposed, and those based on the comprehensive plan process. So that takes us to poll number 2. So please get your phones out if you could. Go ahead, Margaret. So here we're looking for open-ended responses for the biggest priority for the town of Malta's zoning code. So please keep your answers concise, and then we'll see what pops up.
And if you're having any trouble with the tech, again, these questions will be available online as well.
Is that screen supposed to be on our phones yet?
Should be. Yeah. If you have trouble, if you still have the last question up, you can refresh your page and it should pop up. Smart growth, responsible growth that is fiscally responsible. That is the challenge here, right? It's how do we accommodate growth in a way that doesn't change the character of the community? Common sense development, zoning up to comp plan, parameters. Restrict planned development districts. That was I think that was a comment from the comprehensive plan as well. Is there, the newest one comes at the top, right? Yep, so. Protecting environmentally sensitive areas, and while folks are typing, I will also mention that this has been a priority at the state level from DEC through their new wetland regulations, which many of you may or may not be aware of. The new regulations are going to be more restrictive to development going forward. Restricting PDDs as well as reevaluating current PDDs and the plan development districts. What? PDD is Plan Development District. All right. All right, I think we'll move on to the next one, Margaret. So, recommendations. So, again, we're going to speak broadly of the recommendations that the new code will seek to implement. Providing housing options without changing community character. This is kind of the crux of new zoning in New York State right now, how to do that best. Limiting traffic growth. Some communities have chosen to require transit connections as part of new developments in order to reduce the traffic demands. I'm not saying we're doing that here, but that is an example. Sure. So as an example, other communities have required it's a density overlay district is what it is, and so it can only be used in proximity to transit stops. So through CDTA stops, being near one allows you greater density as an overlay district. That's an example. Not saying we're doing it here, just we don't have that now, no. And also short-term rentals. We'll talk more about that a bit later. That has been a hot button issue in desirable places. It's kind of it's a problem that you have if you live in a nice place because people want to visit. So a number of communities around here have tackled that in a variety of different ways, and we're going to need to address that in the new code for Malta as well. I think one last thing on that, and we'll get more into it later, but I think it's important to remember that there are benefits and costs to short-term rentals, and that context I think is important when discussing how regulations may work. There are benefits, but there are also costs to housing availability. So go ahead, Margaret. PDDs, Planned Development Districts. This was a topic that came out of the comprehensive plan as well. PDDs are custom zoning classifications that are custom to each development proposal. And where used, the comprehensive plan has stated that the town needs to ensure that PDDs are of community benefit and conserve natural resources. Go ahead, Margaret. Some commercial recommendations, encouraging infill developments, encouraging commercial developments and anticipating new trends, supporting longstanding businesses and longstanding local businesses, and as I said, infill, promoting infill first. This is kind of the, win-win scenario where community can support development without changing community character is if you redevelop existing properties without turning to green fields. So that was a priority to come out of the comprehensive plan. For infrastructure and transportation, accounting for climate change. So the increasing prevalence of severe storms was a recommendation, to accommodate that with stormwater regulations and infrastructure through code efforts and infrastructure efforts. Again, keeping traffic growth limited. What drives traffic growth? Commercial destinations as well as residential density. How do you control that? How do you accommodate housing most effectively? As I mentioned earlier, with possible ties to to transit as an outlet for that. For agriculture, open space preservation and recreation. So supporting agriculture. New York State supports agriculture pretty strongly with in ag districts. Ag uses are protected across the state in those districts, and ways that the local community can support that also help lengthen the life of an agricultural operation. For open space preservation, that can come in many forms, often with subdivision regulations, often with the limitations on floor area ratio. Those are different aspects that keep an area green, even if you're accommodating development. With contemporary issues, we talked about a little bit about short-term rentals earlier. With renewable energy, that goes to solar and wind facilities. How do we successfully regulate them? How do we encourage that renewable energy source without, again, changing the character of the community? In some cases, large facilities are out of the local government's hands in New York State. Anything under 25 megawatt of production is under the control of local municipalities. So, and even beyond that, if you have regulations, even if you're not in control of the process, the State Office of Renewable Energy Siting is. If you have reasonable regulations, the developer, even at a large scale, will have to abide by it. So it's important to have those regulations in place. Some other themes, clarifying some signage regulations, definitions, some code inconsistencies. One of the things that has been brought up is that the code on E-Codes 360 needs to be updated as an example to the actual code. So that's some of the things that we'll be working with E-Codes 360 on. And E-Codes 360 is the host, the web host of the zoning code for the town and for most towns in New York State. And revising the map and code to reflect these changes. So again, at a broad brush, those are some of the changes that we're looking to make. One of the things that's difficult at public workshops for zoning is getting into the weeds at the first meeting. And I wanted to present to you what we're looking at and get your feedback on those topics so that it'll help us make those finite changes in the weeds. Go ahead, Margaret. We'll see what the folks think of these questions. So in regards to housing, I think that Malta should prioritize the following. And again, if you have trouble, you can refresh your browser. It should pop up. We do have some paper copies up here too. So please check all that apply. We have maintaining low-density rural areas, developing housing in areas where infrastructure already exists, developing senior housing, developing housing options. You scroll down a little bit, Margaret. And then none of the above. So, question?
Yeah, there's no mention of developing low-income housing.
There's not. I guess you could consider that part of housing options, but we can note that specifically. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for the comment. So if you go.
Something to that. I've seen many towns grow, and you get this distortion where the people who actually do the work can't live in the town, and you end up with two communities. You end up with serious social distortions.
No, and I'll just rephrase that for the folks listening online. If a gentleman in the crowd added that if low-income housing options aren't provided, sometimes you have basically two societies where one can't live in one community and has to live in another, and, did I get that right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So some of the feedback that we received here, it looks like the largest vote getter was developing housing in areas where infrastructure already exists. That's part of that infill development idea. Maintaining low density in rural areas. Again, this kind of feeds into preserving community character. But we have some votes for developing senior housing. And can you scroll down, Margaret?
Trying to.
Okay.
I'm not sure I can.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one then. Oh, there you go. All right. And then a few less for more housing, and then E, none of the above. So just so you can see the results. Go ahead, Margaret. So in regards to housing, are there any other priorities you feel Malta should have? If so, what? In regards to housing specifically. Do we need provisions for new types of housing, like cottage courts? Sir?
Yeah, I'm sorry to bother you again, but one aspect of this is, I live in Malta Garden. It's a mobile home park. We are low-income people. There's a little concern that as development proceeds and land becomes more valuable, that the park might be sold, and people there are stuck. You can't move a mobile home without causing expense without abandoning. These are the people who actually do the work in the community. And they have limited resources. There's considerable concern that the park might be sold to an attractive offer and turned into.
So just to repeat for the folks on listening in online, a gentleman in the crowd mentioned, the mobile home park, Malta Gardens, feeling that it could be under threat for encroachment, for growth, for sale, and then therefore pricing its residents out, because relocating a mobile home is pretty difficult. So did I capture that? Yep. Yep. So thank you for that comment. Yes, in the back.
To kind of bounce off of what he was saying, Malta Garden specifically is not zoned as a mobile home park. It's zoned as a planned development district. So I think that's where a lot of the concern is coming from, because New York State has a few protections for people that live in a mobile home park, should it be sold or anything like the concerns that he was saying would happen. But because we're not zoned as a mobile home park, we don't get those protections. So that's where a lot of the
fear comes from. So just to repeat again for folks online, to follow up on the concern for Malta Gardens is that it's not zoned mobile home park. It's zoned as a PDD, and therefore some of the housing protections that the state may offer don't apply. And so again, if it were to change, the fear is that it would price people out. So some of the other comments that we received online, short-term rentals, reducing availability of owner-occupied housing. That's a problem we're seeing in popular areas. I think, again, like I said earlier, it's important to keep in mind that there are some benefits, but they need to be weighed against some significant costs as well. And that often comes in taking houses off the market for potential homeowners. Limiting traffic congestion and keeping taxes low. Low-income housing, as previously mentioned, as a concern, as a priority. Workforce housing, affordable housing, preservation of established mobile home parks. It kind of goes into more of the conversation we were just having. So thank you for your comments on that. Move on to the next one, Margaret. So then we're going to move to commercial development. How would you prioritize the following? New commercial development, supporting long-standing businesses, filling vacant commercial spaces before developing new, and discouraging commercial development, E, none of the above, and you can select all that apply. I think that's been kind of a focal point of Malta's development over the last 20 years is trying to keep those corridors where the businesses are.
I know that this poll provides percentages. Can we also display the number of votes as well?
Can it display that, Margaret?
I don't think it displays the number here, but we could probably look at that on the back end.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have the results of this summary as well as the feedback online provided to the town to be posted on the website. So, cool. One more question, yeah.
How long will the questionnaire be available online? Like, is there a deadline for it?
Yes, that's a good question. It'll be available through next Wednesday, April 23rd.
Does it close, I take it at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. when this meetings? So a week.
It'll probably close 11:59. We'll probably close it the next morning. So. So yeah, some of our results here, again, it looks like the strongest support is for supporting longstanding local businesses, followed by infill development. And then it looks like it's pretty even between new commercial development and discouraging commercial development. So there you go. So how about the next one? And so here we're looking for some more open-ended responses. What are your priorities for commercial development? Is it infill development? Is it no big box? Is it, what types of retail are you looking for? Is it providing walkability to these areas? Is it transit options? With development within the downtown Malta form-based code area, there continues to be a growing ability for walkability in downtown Malta, to be able to walk to the commercial corridors from those areas. It's not for the entire town, but in that form-based code area, it is taking shape that way. Restaurants, grocery, no big box. I think I've been talking maybe a little bit downtown Malta specific, but if we're not mentioning something, along the lake or off of exit 12 west, I wanted to bring that up to talking point as well. So a variety of restaurants, we're seeing, with the growth of Saratoga Springs as a destination, you're seeing retail opportunities move south, move north, move east out of Saratoga, and obviously Malta's, right at its doorstep. Public transportation along Route 9, recreation at the lake. Buster's Car Wash. So a variety of responses here. One of the things I will say that's a limitation of any zoning code is that the type of and brand of retail establishment, you can't control that in a zoning code. That's private sector. But the style of development can be controlled, and that's what the zoning code can contribute. So I think we'll move on to the next one, Margaret. So which of the following strategies do you think would be most effective in supporting ag and open space in Malta? And select all that apply. Allowing the sale of farm products on site, allowing agritourism, setting aside required conservation areas for new developments, within new developments. capital reserve fund for a town to purchase lands for conservation, none of the above. This gives us a sense of things that the public might prioritize, and then we can make regulations to the like.
Explain choice C, it sounds sort of internally contradictory.
Yeah, it should be setting aside required conservation areas within new developments. So we're not, yeah. It should be within, not for, sorry. And can you scroll up a little bit, Margaret? We got it, the font's too big on this thing. You can't see all the responses at once. Allowing the sale of farm products on site, popular choice. Some of these are, you got to be cognizant, there are some negative consequences of, especially for neighbors. But it appears, setting aside, allowing the sale of farm products on site is important, as well as setting aside conservation areas and new developments. Why don't you go to the next one, Margaret? So regarding ag and open space, what maybe have we missed? What other priorities should we take into account? One of the land use regulations that helps promote open space is often cluster subdivision, which the town has already. But for those who may not know, that is an application of subdivision law where instead of spreading houses across a property, they're clustered in one area of the site, often given some bonus for doing that. And then it preserves the rest of the site as open space. So the community gets the benefit of the open space, the developer gets the benefit of having the development that they want, even if it's on a tighter area of the property. All right, so some of the comments we have here, local farm stands, chickens, transfer development rights. That's a proposal I've seen elsewhere, which allows, it's a involved process, but it can allow communities to steer development where they want it and preserve open space where they don't. Limiting water infrastructure, that is a good way to preserve open space. Often development goes where infrastructure is. Not that the zoning code doesn't have much say over where the infrastructure goes, but that is a good thing to note. All right, we'll move on to the next one, Margaret. So we'll talk on some contemporary zoning issues before we bring it to a close here, and I'll turn it over to Margaret.
Awesome. So one topic that's been brought up a lot is solar. Currently, Malta does not have a solar law or any regulations in the zoning code about it. And as Bob mentioned, New York State law allows municipalities, towns, cities, villages to regulate solar, especially for facilities under 25 megawatts. And if it's over that, it's more regulated by the state. And then there's some language in there that you can't have laws that are unreasonably burdensome for solar to be developed. So some other communities in the state and nearby especially have regulated topics like how big the solar facilities can be, the view shed, which means like where you could see the solar facilities from, decommissioning strategies, so that's like at the end of the solar panel's life, what happens to them, how do they get taken down?
Yeah, those are really important, if I could jump in there, Margaret. And in the development of those laws, often, almost every time, local first responders are brought in to understand, all right, how does a fire truck get in here? Are we avoiding flammable potential vegetation alongside solar panels, and then decommissioning? So what happens when it's done being a solar field? How is that accounted for? Is there an escrow to help deal with that situation? So And those kind of go along the same lines as impact fees. Well, one thing I was going to add was that often the larger fields, the ones that are greater than 25 megs, follow transmission lines. It just, they're kind of set where they're going to be most likely to be. Now, technology does evolve, but we're often seeing them in the same places, in larger areas where there's, more rural areas where there's larger tracts of land that can be converted. That's where we're seeing the big fields. That's where we're seeing the big ones. But it totally makes sense to have laws in place for the under 25 megs, and then being able to apply those if, for whatever reason, a larger facility were to come knocking. So, yes.
Is there any part of Malta, and maybe you could point it out to us on the map, where there are in fact high voltage transmission lines which would make adjacent property more attractive for solar? Do we have that in Malta?
I don't have that information available to me right now. You would think to provide for global, but I don't have maps of that right now.
Stonebreak Road,
Yeah.
what's that running, east-west or what?
Yep. So I don't have a map of that available right now.
I would just think that in that whole discussion, areas that were more attractive for these should be identified.
Definitely. Yep. And we have that data. I just don't have it with me. But thank you for that comment. Go ahead, Margaret.
Awesome. And then just a couple other things. Some communities have put limits on the acres of trees that can be cleared or percentages of trees, and then farmland protection as well. So for wind, similarly, Malta does not have a wind law or regulations in the zoning code. Some other communities have regulated things like how far they are from the property lines, how far turbines are, and distance from roads, etc. Wildlife impacts, so for instance, requiring bird and bat surveys because they can get stuck in the turbines. Visual impacts, like what colors the turbines are, signage around them, noise regulations, safety regulations, and how high the turbines can be. And then what happens at the end of their life. That's like
Decommissioning.
decommissioning. What happens to the turbines? And yeah, Bob, was there anything you want to add with that?
Nope. I mean, I would say that it falls along the same lines as solar fields. You're going to see the big facilities along the high transmission lines as well. But as many of you have probably seen, there's also the applicability on residential properties too.
And then moving on to short-term rentals. So Bob talked about this earlier, but it's if you've heard of Airbnb or Vrbo, those companies. For those of you who might not be familiar, it's guests can stay at somebody's house if you sign up for a night or two, or sometimes a couple weeks. Right now, there are not any regulations in Malta except for one of the planned development districts in the town, so just a small part of the town. And then Bob mentioned this earlier, but short-term rentals can provide economic benefits, but also impacts to the community. So some other municipalities nearby have regulated things like how many short-term rentals can be permitted, where they can be located, the number of renters or guests allowed, owner occupancy requirements. So for instance, requiring the owner to live on the property for at least half the year. What time of year the rentals can be rented out, and how long the stay can be. So like, do you want people to stay for a week or 2 weeks? And then parking requirements. So for instance, having a certain number of spaces that are off-street for those rentals, for the guests.
No, that's a good description, Margaret. And in the local context, you might see, and this has been a historic thing in Saratoga County, folks renting out their homes for track season. And I think you may think that, you might want to restrict the length of a rental term, but actually by having a minimum length of rental term, you could discourage it being a constant turnover of people. If you're saying a minimum length is a week, then you're not going to have renters all the time, but you could have the person who rents their house in the summer for Saratoga. So, as an example, there are other communities that have this sort of legislation's evolving right now in New York State. The ramifications of it really have come to roost in the last couple of years, and I think there's still some litigation to resolve some things. But a big concern for many communities is how do we keep track of these things? Are you going to be surfing are town staff going to be just refreshing the Verbo page every 5 minutes? That hasn't seemed to make a lot of sense either. What some communities have done is charge a licensing fee, an annual licensing fee that pays for the service to do that. And I know that's been enacted in Lake George and in Saratoga. And in Queensbury, I know that they've got time of year and rental length requirements in their code. Again, the situation's evolving. I know in Queensbury, they are dealing with some housing affordability issues because of how many people are renting out their homes, in addition to other factors. So, I think it's important that communities get a grasp on how prevalent they are in your community and the effects of it from a tourism perspective, but also as a housing affordability perspective. Yeah.
What about flipping it the other way as well? How do you protect renters that the building that they're staying in is safe, that there's a fire extinguisher, for example?
Yeah.
There's exits that are easily marked and reached, that kind of thing. Shouldn't there be regulations about that as well?
Oh, yeah. And that kind of goes along with the permitting facet of proposed laws is, a code enforcement's got to go in and inspect. They have to make sure that, if there's a fire, that a fire truck can get down the driveway. You don't want 30 cars in the driveway. And so that often goes hand in hand with that to protect the safety of renters.
I'm glad you brought up the enforcement and now protection of renters issue. Is that the kind of thing that you can write into a zoning code? Because you guys are going to be writing language. Or is it just you make a one-sentence recommendation on a page somewhere and you hope somebody pays attention to it?
No, I mean, that would be part of the code language was that there would be an inspection on an annual or biannual basis to confirm safety features like that, like building code. So.
As well as the permitting.
Well,
What I call the enforcement part, making sure that the landowner or the property owner is complying with
Right.
whatever restrictions have been put on. Okay.
Right, because if, any of us who live in a neighborhood where there's Airbnbs, sometimes there's after hours calls for whatever reason, people on vacation. So if they aren't, if they're stacking their building with too many people, that isn't allowed at that situation, they would be able to be punished for that if you have it in the regulation.
All that stuff right into the zoning code.
Yes. Yeah. Question?
Make another point
Yeah.
on that. The short-term rental of properties also provides a very important benefit to many people who couldn't otherwise afford to stay in their homes. Many retirees are able to rent, especially in this area, a house for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the track, pays for their taxes, and they don't have to sell their house. Housing's already gotten very unaffordable in certain areas, and it provides a very meaningful benefit. The other part of it is people own their land. And they already have zoning, they already have HOA rules, they already have all these rules. And at what point do you no longer own your property? Certain places you can't paint it any color, you can't do anything with your property. And we just keep adding more and more onto homeowners. One of the things that was referenced is senior affordability housing. Well, if you're retired and your income goes down, your taxes stay the same, your expenses stay the same. And this, for many people, is a way to defray those costs. So you need to consider both sides of the story before you just want to regulate people's rights away.
No, absolutely. There are pros and cons to the short-term rental debate, and providing another source of income for folks is an important thing to keep in mind. Yes.
Yeah, just another comment. Yeah, I agree with the gentleman that, that these short-term rentals do have benefits for the community. Originally, Airbnb was conceived as a way to use up spare space in your house. So you're not there for a couple of weeks, or you have a spare bedroom, you can take advantage of that. The more serious problem arises when people start buying up rental properties and converting them entirely to Airbnb and shutting out local residents. New York City is suffering from that.
Right. That kind of speaks to the occupancy requirement as a way to kind of capture both sides of that. No, thank you for that. All right. Go ahead, Margaret. So this is our last poll of the night, so I know I see a lot of groans out there. I hear you. But yeah, please give us one more feedback loop here. So go ahead, Margaret. So on a scale of 1 to 5, discourage to encourage, how would you, or should Malta discourage or encourage renewable energy facilities in the town?
Can you be more specific?
Yeah, what, you're talking about the Hoover Dam, you're talking about an 800-foot high windmill?
I'm talking about renewable energy. Renewable energy, it could be, small scale, could be large scale, just in general. How do you feel about that? Is it positive? Should we encourage that or not? Obviously, you want it, if you encourage it, you want it under the right regulations, right? Yeah. Yes, in the back.
We would also like to know, would that benefit the residents, So like, if Global Foundries is developing this, is it strictly for Global Foundries or are the residents going to benefit from it? Because if we're not going to benefit from it, then we kind of don't want to look at it.
Okay, so just to reiterate for folks online, the comment was made that with renewable energy, we should consider how it benefits the community, not just, maybe the commercial sector folks.
Tackled through regulation.
Absolutely.
I'm going to vote in the middle of the scale, but I'd like to make another comment.
Sure.
That clarifies that within that whole earlier context of priorities about small town feel and all that. But what I'd like to say is, yeah, renewable energy is fine at a certain scale. When we start getting to the industrial scale, I don't think it belongs in a residential community.
So you prefer residential, if you're going to have renewable energy at a residential scale?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So solar panel on the roof is fine.
I'm all for residential up at 5, but I'm down at 1 for.
I think you're squarely in the 3, if you ask me.
I think it's, the way I take this is, do you like the concept of renewable energy? If so, you would be on the more positive side. And then if the town wants that, then it would come down to how we want to regulate that.
Yep.
To effectively meet the needs of the town. Is it going to benefit us? Is it going to be on a scale that we are acceptable, et cetera, et cetera?
That's well said. Yeah, we can take the next step to make sure that, again, it fits in community character. But we want to know, is it something that the residents want to push? Yes.
Just to note, Bob, either you need to repeat the questions or I'll ask you to go up to the podium because people at home can't hear the questions.
Okay. Okay.
Bob, it's fine if you just repeat.
I'll repeat the questions.
Renewable energy, we've had applications where they want to put them in LC zones. And in that regard, I would absolutely discourage renewables in LC zones.
And the comment in the crowd was that we should discourage renewable energy facilities in the LC zone, land conservation zone. Okay, I think we got a smattering in the middle of the chart for preference for renewables.
And I get one final comment
Sure.
on that or question. We can we can make regulation even if we don't have any of this. You know, if we're for it or not, we can put regulations saying if it were to happen regardless, it needs to have all the benefits
Sure.
or provisions that we would put forward.
So the question is, even if we don't have these facilities, can we put regulations in for them, even if we don't have them yet or won't have them? Did I get that right? And if I could respond to that, the answer is yes, you definitely want them because they could come. And if you don't have regulations, that makes it more difficult for the planning board, for the planning staff to effectively communicate with an applicant. This is what the community wants, and this is what you have to do. So even if you don't have facilities like this now, even if, you know, I don't think it's the case here, but even if you're in a place where Airbnb is not, or where short-term rentals are not a big thing right now, you should get regulations in. So you can effectively communicate, hey, we want folks to be able to do this if they're owner occupied or not, or, you know, we just so that you're prepared if they do come.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear.
Yep.
It's a lot easier to control something before it's a big problem rather than after the horse is out of the barn.
Very good point. The comment in the crowd was that it's a lot easier to control something before it arises as a big issue. So go ahead, Margaret. All right, another question. Which of the following topics do you feel should be regulated with regard to renewable energy? Renewable energy. Size of solar facility, visual impacts, limits on clearing, impact fees, farmland protection, distance from property lines, wildlife impacts, safety regulations, noise. Obviously, these are things that I think a lot of people are going to check all that apply. Decommissioning strategies is very important. You know, we've seen elsewhere in the state where solar and wind companies, you know, they may go out of business for whatever reason. Then you're left with a vacant field. What's the process for getting that safe? You know, when it's in productive business, you have the incentive of the property owner to maintain it so it can be used. But if it goes derelict, that's a problem for the whole community. So having a decommission plan in place can help account for that. Often in the form of an escrow or bond. It looks like we got a pretty wide smattering here. I don't know if anyone got more than another. Oh, ranging from 9 to 11. All right. We like all those ideas, I guess, Margaret. All right, how about the next one? Short-term rentals. The notion of short-term rentals in town. Obviously, we can regulate them to different degrees. Is that something that the folks here in the audience are in favor of having or not? So we're getting a lot of votes in the 3 category, which it seems like a pretty tepid response. You know, as I read that, we're okay with it if it's properly regulated, but not that it's a dramatic need. And we have a couple on either end of the spectrum, discouraging and encouraging. Yeah, again, it's important to keep in mind the benefits and the costs. So regulations that can strike the balance there, I think, are important. All right, go ahead, Margaret. Which of the following topics do you feel should be regulated with regard to short-term rentals? We talked about some of these earlier. Registration and permitting, allowable locations, quantity, number of, I don't think we even talked about that yet, but some places have put quotas on the amount that they'll have as a percentage of their housing supply. You know, that's kind of a more extreme case. I think the city of Lackawanna actually just banned them. But that's, again, I think a lot of this is still ripe for some challenges. But that is what they've done. So some of the responses, it looks like we've got 18% for owner occupancy requirements, 18% for registration and permitting, little less for allowable regulations and number of guests and time of year, strong responses for rental length and parking. So those would be priorities for us as we develop regulations. All right, and then this is kind of a catch-all here, and before I answer any questions, I want to see folks enter any things that we may have missed in our discussion tonight regarding zoning that we need to include in our update to the code. So anything that we may not have covered tonight, now's your chance to bring it up and we can talk about it briefly. I'll give you a few minutes, but please be as concise as you can in your comment and we can talk about it. And while you're typing, I'll just remind the folks at home and apologize for some of the audio question issues. But these questions are available on a survey that we'll have up in a moment, and they'll be available for comment for the next week. So if you or folks you know weren't able to attend tonight, you'll be able to offer the feedback on there for the next week, and we'll be able to put it together with these comments tonight. So some of the issues that we haven't addressed fully are mobile home zoning, flashing electronic signs. What else we got here, Margaret? No other issues at this time. Violations, all violations should be clear to residents. Example, description of violation should be included in the code. So just trying to make it more clear as day what violations there may be, so that it can be more easily understood. So, no, I think those are, I think that's a well-received comment. The mobile home park issue, and the prevalence of planned development districts in the town are noted.
But this is one of the ways that low-income people get pushed out of the community.
Right. And
Rising land values, put pressure on these places.
that's I can't argue with that. Comment from the crowd was that the threat facing Malta Gardens, perceived threat of potentially being sold and no longer being a mobile home park, and then the removal of that housing option, can push people out of the community and based on price. So, we talked about a little earlier about encouraging housing options, and that's part of that discussion for sure.
Can I understand correctly that the state of New York does provide a specific mobile home park protection, or that it does not?
Yes, but if it has to be zoned.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it
It
has to fall under that specific type of land use distinction. So, and the final comment, just keeping it simple and needing to enact the comprehensive plan. So, all right, I think you can move on, Margaret. So what do we got here? It's 7:09. So we'll get into next steps and discussion here. We've had some discussion throughout. We've had, I think, a good manageable group, and I thank you for your respectful conversation tonight. So what's next? So we'll be taking this feedback. We'll be working with town planning staff to refine the zoning code and zoning amendments, create that draft language, which again will be published for folks to view well in advance of the public hearings. Before that gets to there, it'll have to go through SEQR, which is the State Environmental Quality Review Act process, which any land use regulation needs to move through, which will have its own public hearing process, and legal review as well with the town attorney. There'll also be, not listed here, is a county planning referral that will also occur once a full draft is provided, that the county planning board will get to offer their comments to the town on the proposed law. And then there'll be also this public hearing, which we anticipate getting scheduled next month. And that before the code is finalized and adopted and then ultimately implemented. So that is the look ahead.
Concept, I know you can't make a promise, but is there any anticipated schedule of when these various steps will be completed?
Can I yield to the town supervisor on that?
Well, we hope to schedule a public hearing by the end of May and adopt the zoning changes by the beginning of June. So, I mean, we've done a lot of the work, the board's met in several different workshops, you know, identified the areas that the board thinks is important. You know, we'll see what we yield from tonight. And we have another workshop, by the way, on Monday at 4 o'clock, the town board.
Yep.
I'm
I was getting ready to.
I'm getting the eye from the clerk, so. So we anticipate scheduling the public hearing sometime the end of next month and adopting the legislation, hopefully in the beginning of June. The town board has had several workshops where we identified issues that we think need to be changed in the zoning code. And on Monday, we're having what we hope will be our final workshop. It's at 4 o'clock in this room, a workshop of the town board. We'll sit around informally, depending on how many, people are in attendance. I can always allow some public input at that meeting. And then, hopefully we'll talk about it and move forward. It is an aggressive schedule, but it's important work that I think we need to get done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I know there were a number of administrative sort of changes that we've already noted. And, it's more like make sure we reference the right chapter, that sort of thing. We've already started looking at those things, but we wanted some of these larger issues related to housing, to open space protection, to how we structure infill development, how we handle short-term rentals and renewable energy. We needed to hear from you. So we still need to hear from you, which brings me to the next slide, where we have the public survey available here on the QR code on the left. Again, that'll be available. It's a SurveyMonkey link for folks. We'll get those responses. We'll combine it with the feedback that we received tonight before we address them in the code. And again, we're looking for feedback. That should be April 23rd, not May 23rd, but next Wednesday.
I also, one thing to add is there's a lot of talk about the Planned Development District legislation and short-term rentals. I don't expect that work to be done by the beginning of June. I think those are things that we need to do outside the context of this editing of the zoning map and making those changes and doing the housekeeping things with our regular code. I expect that as soon as we finalize this, we'll start right in with whichever of those issues the board thinks we should do first. I'm kind of thinking it's probably going to be planned development districts, but that's outside the context of this first step.
Planned development districts are part of the zoning code. I thought you're going to adopt the new zoning code in another month.
They are, but I think they can be done outside of the context of this. What we're talking about here are really the recommendations that are identified in the comprehensive plan. Reworking the code is not specifically identified in the comprehensive plan. It says limit using them.
Rewriting planned development districts is specifically identified in the plan.
I don't think so.
Yes, it is, multiple places.
Okay. Well, right.
In the whole process, why is that?
Mostly, Peter, because it'll drag this whole process out longer than we need it to. And the other part is, with planned development districts, the one thing about planned development districts, for everybody to know, is the town board does not have to entertain them at all. I mean, we can just say, we're not going to entertain them until we rework it. We can tell people don't to make application. If somebody makes a planned development district application, we can just say no. So I don't think that's as pressing as these other changes right now. So
Yeah, and I just add that, there's nothing stopping the town from, making changes to even a
Right.
code that's adopted in a couple months. It can
Right.
be updated at any time. Yes.
So this is probably slightly outside the scope of your expertise, but how would we proceed in Malta Gardens? Is there a mechanism by which we can get the zoning changed to a more favorable?
We'll be talking about that at our workshop on Monday.
You will?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and, yeah.
Slightly different subject, but I thought I heard you reference it. I'm always most impressed by those towns who control signage and the appearance of buildings in their areas. There are certain areas where yes, you can have a McDonald's, but the sign is like 2 foot tall. Or it looks like a colonial. Do we have any ability to say no exploding signs, no garish signs, no of those wind-blown Gumby things?
The wacky waving inflatable arm flailing tube men, yeah.
Have any ability to control that?
Yes, that is, section.
Repeat it a little bit.
Yes, so I'll repeat the question. Had to do with the regulation of sign design, size, movement, brightness, and building facades. Yes, the answer is yes, the town can regulate those things. I will say that, and we have a number of recommendations kind of in the hopper to how to do that best already. I will say that it is a little bit of a challenge. There are some, Bill of Rights protections for signage that we can't overstep, but towns have those guidelines at their disposal. Some that you may have described, like colonial looking, a lot of times those are in specific design guideline districts, which is probably not where the town's going to go, but just the size, it's kind of sort of the basic stuff that can be regulated in regular sign code. And one more question?
Well, it's not just, I keep hearing that we want it to look like a small town. We don't want it to be garish, like certain other communities around.
So the comment was that we don't want big signs, big garish signs, if we want this to look like a small town.
Is this live on the site now?
Yes. The question was is it live? And those online will know that it is live.
And I'll put the papers with the links at the door too, so you can scan the QR codes or just visit the links.
No, thank you, Margaret. Another question in the audience?
Not as exciting as renewable energy, but one of the recommendations in the comprehensive plan is to protect the scenic visual resources of the town. And as I recall, the recommendation simply comes down to, I think, mapping views and view sheds. And I just wondered if, since you're the planning firm, if that's one of the exercises you're going to go through, are you going to produce a map or make recommendations to the board in that regard?
We haven't decided that yet. I know that was a recommendation in there.
I guess I'm gonna have to start getting the audience.
Oh, sorry,
To
yeah.
come up to ask
Yeah,
the
yeah.
questions. The question was if Barton and La Judas will be mapping view sheds that are recommended to protect in the town of Malta.
Yep, and thank you for that. I forgot to
I know.
repeat the question. But we haven't decided yet how far to take the view shed protections, but we'll note that as a concern, so. Okay.
Well, thanks again, everybody. And if you didn't submit comments tonight, please do, because we're interested in what
Oh,
anybody has to say. Oh, you had more?
Sorry about that.
So thanks for coming out.
yeah, thanks,
And
everybody.
hopefully we'll see
Your
you Monday.
participation was really appreciated. Stay tuned online for our summary of tonight so you know what we took down. So, see you soon. Thank you.